Good morning, everyone. So today we're going to be working towards a little bit more core intensive work, getting into a movement sequence that I call the Primal Core Flow. Primal Core Flow, I've taken basically from a kind of jujitsu practice that a movement that I learned through some of my teachers. I consider it one of a good indicator of solid core ability. If you can do the Primal Core Flow, you're probably got a really good combination of core strength and coordination. I find the movement of the Primal Core Flow to be real important as far as how it relates to our gait, movements through that posterior shoulder into that contralateral posterior hip, as well as getting into really good shoulder strengthening work, getting those shoulders to be able to pack down and back and connect into our core. And there's aspects of the Primal Core Flow that are really good as far as building up push-up strength. If you want to learn how to do a good push-up and you can't do a good push-up, the push-up is the worst place for you to start. You need to start with some other things that build up the basics that allow you to do a good solid push-up. So that's going to be towards the end of the class. There's going to be progressions of the movement that I expect most people will be unable to do safely. So it's going to be important that, number one, you follow the rules of pain and you pay attention to where you are able to do it well. And the point in which you are no longer able to do it well means you are no longer, you should need to back up and focus on where you can do it well. Work on that area for a period of time and then start introducing the next level up slowly, safely, cautiously. If there is pain related to any of these movements, I want you to stop the video, schedule a session with me so we can talk about what you need to do in order to get out of the pain so that you can do the movement in a way that won't make the pain and injury worse. So, with all that, let's get started. We're going to start on our back. I want to get into our crocodile breath first. Having a big part of the Primal Core Flow is going to be focused on having good access to breath. So that's where we're going to start. Making our big C shapes with our hands. The thumbs are going to go into the low back musculature. So I want to feel those low back muscles. Index fingers are wrapping around the front into the abdominals. Palms are pressing into the side body. And I want the hands to be below the rib cage and above the hip bone so that we're in that nice meaty section of the abdominal wall. And at this point, we're going to kind of imagine that we're breathing like a crocodile, or we want to imagine our midset, that abdominal wall, like a balloon. On the inhale, we want it to expand out and away. On our exhale, we're going to go out through our mouth as we draw our navel into our spine, almost like you're trying to push your belly button into your spine, into the floor. And we'll do about 5 to 8 nice breaths. And with each breath, try to inflate that balloon or that crocodile a little bit wider. See if you can feel a little bit of a stretch associated with the inhale of your breath. So nice inhale through the nose. I want to feel that abdominal wall pushing into the thumbs, into the low back area, into the index fingers through the front and out into the palms. As we exhale, allow the hands to clench down a little bit so that you create some resistance for your inhale. And again, with each breath, see if you can expand that wall a little wider. And can you keep it even? Does that breath move a little bit more on the right side or the left side? And if so, can you get it to expand evenly? And the areas that I want to really notice the most is this low back area where the thumbs are. How does that space move? If you're having trouble getting that area to expand, this is going to be a part of an area to work daily in order to improve your breath, your capabilities of expanding that breath, giving you a little bit better solid core control. As we get to 6, 7, or 8 breaths, we can let the hands start to soften. We're going to now slowly roll up to a sit, and we're going to come into our quadruped positions. Spreading the hands nice and wide, grounding the palms and extending the elbows fully without locking. I also want to have the toes tucked underneath, especially the big toe. And we're going to start with some just simple wrist mobility. We're going to inhale, rocking our hips back lightly. Exhale, we're rocking forward, loading into the wrists. And I want to load lightly so that you feel that right wrist and left wrist. Inhale, softly rocks back. Exhale, rocking forward. And I still want to continue with that crocodile breath as we get into these other movements. So feel that abdominal wall expand on the inhale. Feel that navel draw into the spine on the exhale. And we'll do just 5 reps for each of the wrist mobility. Once we get to 5 forward and back, we're going to turn the fingers out to the side. We're going to start going side to side. With the side to side, I would like having this push through one palm and pull through the opposite palm as we go back and forth. I want to be very, very active moving through those hands. And notice how that kind of creates the shoulder blades tend to feel a little bit more active on the rib cage. So I want active hands, active shoulders. We're inhaling as we come to the center, exhale as we go to the side, and then inhale back to center. Nice slow breaths help to keep us moving slowly through these mobility drills. I do not want to move quickly, especially if this is the first movement of the day. Next, we're going to turn the fingers all the way back towards the knees. Closer the hands are to the knees, the less intense this is. The further out we come, the more intense. I don't want this to be super intense, so keep the hands relatively close to the knees. We're now inhaling as we lightly rock forward. Exhale as we sink our hips towards our heels, keeping the palms grounded. Try not to let the palms lift up. Inhale forward. Exhale, softly rocking back. On all of these wrist mobility exercises, it's important to notice the difference between the right side and the left side. Is one side a little thicker, a little restricted? Does it not move as much? Is it painful? If it's painful, then you need to back off and again, schedule a session with me. Next, we're going to flip our palms upside down to the back side of the palms, allowing the elbows to bend. We're going to lightly push into the floor and extend the elbows. What I really want to feel here is the elbow extension. As we get the elbows extended as much as possible, is there a stretch? If there's a stretch, then that is what we're playing with. I want to move in and out of that stretch lightly, letting the elbows bend, and then moving back, pressing into the floor lightly and extending those elbows. Feel that juicy stretch. I don't want to force it. It should feel good and comfortable. If you can extend the elbows fully and there is no stretch, then we can come back to rocking back. Inhale forward, exhale, lightly rock back hips to heels. After that, I want to take a little break on the wrists. I want to roll them out. We're going to spend a little bit more time on the wrists, so I want to make sure that we're not overloading them. Once they feel kind of loose and limber again, we'll come back grounding palms Keeping those toes tucked. And now we're going to get into spirals of the long arm bones. I want to focus first on only moving the humerus and the radius and the ulna. We're going to spiral, kind of paying attention to the armpit areas. Spiral those elbows so that they're facing as far forward as you can, and then internally spiraling them as far back as you can. These are basically kind of bowls of soup with our hands loaded to the ground. And notice how far are you able to spiral your right elbow compared to your left elbow in both directions. Are you able to get them to spiral forward evenly? Or does one go a little further than the other? Are you able to get them to spiral back evenly? Or is one going further than the other? As we're going back and forth with that spiral, I want to notice how the shoulder blades kind of want to move here. And we're going to now let them move. So as we spiral elbows internally, shoulder blades are going to rise up on our rib cage, and we can lightly press through the floor and see if you can feel a nice stretch in between the shoulder blades in that upper back area. And then as we spiral elbow pits forward again, I want to feel those shoulder blades slide down our upper back. They should move down towards our hips, kind of locking into our rib cage. So spiral elbows in, feel those shoulders float up and get wide, feel that stretch in between the shoulder blades and the spine. Elbows spiral forward, feel the shoulder blades pack. Chest will kind of lightly drop to the floor. Now I want to add our breath into this. So as the elbows are spiraling internal, we are exhaling. As we're spiraling forward, feeling the shoulders pack, we are inhaling. And now we're going to add in our pelvis to this. As we exhale, spiraling in, I want to scoop the pelvis. As we press into the hands, now we're going to get that big stretch through the shoulders and all the way down into the low back area. And as we inhale, elbow pits go forward, pelvis turns down to the floor, and we get a big sway in our low back. Belly kind of opens up to the floor. I want to find as much range of motion through this as we can without going into any pinch or pain in the low back area. Good. We're going to go ahead and take a little rest on the wrists. We're going to add one more little component to that movement, but I'm going to show this one to you and give your wrists a little rest. So we're going to do cat-cow circles. So we were just doing our cat-cows, now we're going to do circles. We're going to start by doing some side-to-side glide with the rib cage. On this, imagine my hands are on the floor right now. I'm in a loaded position, but I'm kind of bringing them up so you can see. From this loaded position, we are going to move from our rib cage, letting it glide to the side and then glide across to the other side. I'm showing this because this is a really difficult move to isolate neurologically. What you will probably find is that as you're doing this, either your shoulders are going to want to move back and forth or the hips are going to want to move back and forth. I want the hips and the shoulders to not be moving very much. We're moving through that rib side to side. So this will be difficult. And it's also a good assessment point that you'll probably find that rib cage glides in one direction easier than it does in the other direction. And that's going to be relevant to our gait mechanics. So this is a good assessment point. So coming back to our hands, nice spread hands, grounded palms, elbows are extended fully but not locked. Again, toes are tucked. And we're going to exhale as we glide across, reaching that rib. Inhale as we come back to center. Exhale as we glide to the other side. And again, I want to watch out for, I don't want my shoulders to be moving over my hands. My shoulders are fixed over my hand position. The movement I am making is at my rib. Rib is gliding. Shoulders move a little bit because it's hard to move them, for them to not move when my ribs are moving, but I am not moving my shoulders. Same thing with the hips. Hips should not be moving to the outside of the feet. They're staying fixed. It's the rib that glides. Next thing we're going to do now is turn this into a circle. So as you reach, slide that rib to the side. Then we're going to exhale, scooping, spiraling the arms. And we're going to reach across to the other side. And then we're going to let go into our cow, letting our belly drop. As we inhale, exhale, as we reach and get big. I like to imagine that on here we're trying to, our spine is a jump rope, and we're trying to spin that rope as big as we can. And notice the areas where it feels tight and restricted. We're going to do 5 in one direction, and then we're going to change directions. And what you may notice as we now change directions going the other way is that going in one direction of this circle is a little bit easier than going in the other direction. Again, very relevant. And any kind of, if you find that that's the case, then this would be a movement that I would encourage you to do a little bit more of on a daily basis to see if you can kind of balance those sides out. All right. So now, still got the toes tucked. We're going to bring hands significantly forward. I want to keep the hips as much over the knees as possible. We're going to get into a version of cat or child's pose. This is where I like to think about having nice sticky gecko-like hands, where my hands are not going to slide out from underneath. We're pressing down into the floor very actively, downward pressure, elbows are straight. We're going to start in this upright position, getting into our breath and playing with pelvic mobility and rib cage mobility. So we're going to inhale into that belly. Feel the pelvis tilt forward as the belly opens up to the floor. On the exhale, we're drawing that navel in and scooping, seeing if we can get a little rounded in that low back without going into pinch or pain. Inhale, feel that belly open up. Exhale, draw that navel into the spine as you scoop. And notice your rib cage. As your pelvis tilts down to the floor, your rib cage is also jutting out on the inhale. On the exhale, as you scoop, that rib cage is lifting back up. It's dropping back towards your hips. We're going to get into our child's pose, and I want to exhale, scoop, and feel that rib drop in as we reach to the floor. I don't want that rib cage sticking out as we reach our chest to the floor. So this will be an important learning point. So we can start to get into that child's pose part. Nice inhale, and then as you exhale, scoop, feel that rib drop as you reach your chest to the floor. Inhale, we're coming right back up, allowing the pelvis to tilt down, filling up the belly, big sway in the back. Exhale, scoop, feel that rib cage get closer to your pelvis. Core should be engaged as you drop down. The more you can keep that rib cage dropped as you reach your chest to the floor, you should feel more mobility stretch around the shoulders, especially around the armpit area. So this is a good one to feel, how does that right shoulder feel compared to the left shoulder? Is one side tighter, more restricted, or does it one side feel a little less stable? On the next one, as we drop down into tension, I want to stay in light tension at the bottom. And now we're going to push through our hands, but since our hands are stuck, we've got gecko hands, it's going to slide our hips back, and we're going to feel the shoulder blades move up to our ears, and then we're going to pull, and I want to feel those shoulder blades slide back down the rib cage towards the hips, going back and forth. We can exhale as we push and inhale as we pull. I want to keep those elbows actively straight in both of these. I don't want the elbows to bend as you're pulling. Try to keep them straight. This is a good one for kind of feeling the sensation of a packed shoulder blade, which is an action that a lot of people lose access to. And is real important. We can now come out of that position a little bit and want to let the shoulders rest. We're going to get back into it for one more thing on our hands. So that packed shoulder is super, super important as far as connecting your arm into your core. And if you cannot pack your shoulders, that means that when you are lifting, throwing, doing things with your arm, you are exposing the smaller muscles around the rotator cuff area to do more work because you're not getting the support, the foundational support from your core. So if you can't do a packed shoulder, it's difficult to feel it, that would be something I would want to work on a lot. Get that in your neurology so that you have access to it. It will save your neck and your shoulders. Coming back to our hands, we'll be in our quadruped. We're going to get into that same depth of shoulder position we were just in the child's pose, but we're going to do it with our knees off the ground. So lifting knees lightly, keeping them somewhat flexed. I don't want to straighten the knees. And then we're going to push through the hands to drop the chest towards the floor. From here, we're going to get into our back line by lengthening one side at a time. I'm actively straightening my knee. I'm reaching the back of my knee back. At the same time, I'm reaching the heel towards the floor. The heel does not need to touch the floor, but we are reaching towards it. And then we're going to soften that leg as we now reach through the opposite side. This is a great one for comparing how does the back line of the right leg feel compared to the left leg. And I want to notice, where do you feel the stretch the most? Is it in the calves? Is it at the back of the knee? Is it in the hamstring? Or are you able to feel kind of a nice continuous stretch throughout? Ultimately, I want to feel the continuous stretch. I don't want to feel a one spot more and not feel the other areas. That will be an indication of some movement restrictions. As we're getting this nice gas pedal effect, if you can, see if you take a little half step forward. How does that feel? Trying to maintain the depths of your shoulders as much as possible. And we'll bring our knees slowly back to the floor. And now we get to get off of our wrists a little bit. We're going to get into our shin box position now. So I'm starting out my left side shin box. Left hand is coming down outside the hip. I want to spiral that elbow pit out and away and feel that shoulder blade pack down and back. Sternum will lift up tall. The sternum lifting tall is going to help that shoulder pack. So if all you're doing is reaching to the floor, but your chest is caved, then you don't have a packed shoulder. We need some thoracic extension with that press in order for that shoulder blade to really find its packed position. From here, I want to stay as fixed through this shoulder as possible. I don't want a whole lot of movement through this shoulder. We're going to focus on our back hip first. Inhale, reach that hip to the floor. If you can touch the floor, great. If not, it's not a huge deal. But what I want to watch out for is as you're reaching that hip, I don't want the opposite knee to lift up off the floor. I want to keep that knee touching, engaged, and we're reaching back here without moving that front leg. Inhale as we let it drop. Exhale we're lifting it off the floor. We're reaching as far forward with the bony prominence of our hip. It's almost like I'm putting my hand here and I'm seeing, can I touch my hand with that hip bone? At the same time, we're still drawing our navel in, so we have a little bit of a scoop, like you're trying to tilt your tailbone forward at the same time. Can you feel some stretch through the front of the hip at the top? Inhale, we're letting it all the way back to the floor. Exhale, we're scooping into it. And with each one, can we scoop into it a little bit more without going into pain? And the more we're able to get extension, get straight through the front of this hip, you should start to notice that the glute, that your butt cheek is kind of getting tighter. And if you're finding that, great. Something I want to watch out for here is I don't want my rib to jut out, just like in the child's pose. Rib should be dropping as we're scooping. Rib cage should be in. If that rib cage is out, it means that you're turning in your upper body and you're not isolating that back hip. We're going to bring it across, do the same thing on the other side. So again, grounded palm, spiraled elbow. Feel that shoulder blade pack as we lift our sternum up. Focusing on that back hip. Inhale. Can you reach that hip to the floor without that front knee lifting up? Exhale, we're lifting, reaching as far forward and scooping. And right off the bat, you may notice that this hip is either more restricted, tighter, or less than the other side. Everybody's going to have a little bit of an imbalance here. So there should be some sensation that's different. How much will depend on how imbalanced it is. This is my tight hip. I have less range of motion through this movement on this hip. It's a little sensitive at the end ranges, especially since this is the first time I'm doing my movements for the day. It's a little bit tight and restricted. But I'm still moving through it slowly with my breath, and I'm still trying to squeeze just a little bit more without going into pain on each one. We'll go ahead and switch back across. We're going to do the exact same movement again for about 5 reps, and then we're going to add our reach with rotation. So again, grounded palm, spiraled elbow, packed shoulder, feel that chest lift. Inhale. Let that hip drop. Exhale, scoop. Feel that stretch through the front. Feel that glute engage. You may notice that by doing this a second time through on both sides, that you have better range of motion. Your mobility has already improved. That's a good thing. That's kind of one of the things we want. Part of the reason we're doing this is to get better range of motion, better mobility, especially early in the day, because the better you're moving early in the day, the better you're going to move through your day, which means at the end of the day, you're going to feel a lot better than you would otherwise. Now, after we get to our 5th one, I want to scoop. Lock that hip. Don't let that hip go. Keep that active stretch. Now, we imagine you got a piece of bread and you got a buddy who's like right through the knee, that front knee, and you're just reaching straight across. As you exhale, inhale, we're bringing it all the way back in. Find the floor with that back hip. Exhale, scoop, and see if you can reach a little further. And on this reach, I'm not folding. I'm not dropping my shoulder, my chest. I'm spiraling over this back arm and seeing how far can I get my fingertips from my back knee. It's like that back knee should be kind of planted into the floor, and I'm seeing how far can I reach through those fingertips. Getting that nice stretch through the front of the hip and some spiral rotational stretch into the spine, and even a little bit of a stretch up into the shoulders. And then we're going to take that across and do the same thing on the other side. So good grounded palm, spiraled elbow, packed shoulder, tall chest. Inhale, letting that back hip drop. Exhale, scoop. Feel that stretch. We're doing 5 without the reach. And again, this is my tight hip, but coming back to it a second time, significant improvement. I'd say a good 25% improvement in mobility. And I can, think about, like, if this feels better this time around on the tighter side, if you did not do this movement, that tightness, that restriction is going to be there with every step that you take on one side. The other side moves freely. How does that translate with 5,000, 10,000 steps a day? One side moving better than the other. How does your spine feel at the end of that day if you don't do these movements? Once we get to 5, we're scooping, lock that hip in, and then adding in our reach with rotation. Oh, and that's such a good one on this side. Since my left hip is tighter, as I get into rotation, my rotation is also tighter because this is a connected pattern. And it's going to be a connected pattern, again, related to my gait mechanics. So the more I'm able to improve this mobility, the better my gait mechanics are going to be through the day. Is it going to be perfect? No. But if I can get a 25-30% improvement in my movement through the day, that probably is going to translate into a significant reduction of injury, pain, and injury risk through the day. And again, with each one, I'm trying to get as far from that back knee with that scoop locked in to my fingertips. Oh, and it feels so good. I'm going to go ahead and move back to the other side. Now we're going to lift that hand off the floor. We're bringing it up and across. I want the forearm to be kind of flush with the ceiling. We're still working this back hip. Inhale, let that hip drop. Exhale, scoop, lock that hip in. As we lock that hip in, now the opposite side. We're reaching down through this hip as we lift and try to get tall through that elbow, like you're trying to touch the elbow to the ceiling. Inhale, we're letting that back hip all the way back to the floor. Exhale, scoop, and tall. What I want to watch out for on this movement, I don't want to drop my opposite shoulder. I'm not folding on this side. I don't want my ribs on this side to get shorter. I want to get long on this side without dropping on the opposite side. So nice inhale, scoop, and see if you can find that length without collapsing the opposite side. And then we'll bring that across to the other side, and we're going to do the same thing. Arm comes up, forearms flush with the ceiling. Inhale as we let that back hip drop. Exhale, scoop, lock that hip in, and then reaching through the opposite hip down, lifting up through the elbow. Where I want to really see if we can isolate this movement. We got a little bit of low, stretch in that back hip, but as we reach down and up at the same time, can we get some length and mobility into this side body, low back area, or up into the shoulder, posterior shoulder area? Since this hip is my tighter hip, this movement over here is a little bit harder to get into. Because again, this is a pattern. These parts of our bodies are connected and they work together. So one area being tight, tense, and locked down generally translates to the entire pattern being tight, tense, and locked down. And this particular side body movement, very, very subtle, but it's also incredibly powerful. A lot of different interesting things related to breath, internal knee pain, shoulder stuff. We can get a lot of relief through that movement, even though it doesn't feel like we're doing a whole lot. Right, switching back to the other side. Now we're going to get into our folds. Want to use that shin. Shoulders are square with the shin. Hands are square with the shoulders. Inhale at the top. I want to reach both hands evenly. I don't want one hand to go further than the other hand. Nice exhale as we reach. Inhale as we bring it all back up. And with each one, we're going to see if we can reach a little bit further. On this, I want to watch out for, I don't want to drop my head or my chest towards the floor. I want to keep my spine tall and long, and I'm letting my hands slide forward, and I'm only going as far as I comfortably can. Inhale, bringing it back. And I'm going to add, I've meant to add in, we're still working this back hip for right now. So inhale, let that back hip drop to the floor. Exhale, scoop it forward and lock it in as we reach forward. That should create a little bit of mobility stretch on that back hip at the same time that we're seeing if there's some stretch on the back of that front hip. And notice how far you're able to go on this side, and then we're going to switch to the other side. We're going to do the same thing. So again, nice tall position. Inhale, feel that back hip drop. Exhale, lift and scoop. And then exhale, reach. Nice fold forward. Inhale, coming back up. We're comparing one side to the other. Notice those hands. If one hand wants to reach a little bit further, that's generally going to indicate some low back tightness. One side's more restricted, it's not able to lengthen, so it's going to hold that hand back. So that's a good thing to notice. It's part of the reason I want to keep those hands reaching perfectly even, keeping things square with the shin. Now that we've done 5 or so on both sides, now we're going to start going back and forth. This is where we can do our windshield wipers, letting our knees go across. I want to keep the feet in contact with the floor as we go from one side to the other. The other option is our thread through, lifting up that back leg, spiraling it around, threading it underneath the front leg, and then the front leg lifts and spirals back into the opposite side shin box. I like this one because it keeps me facing the same direction on my mat. When I do the windshield wipers, I tend to move a lot more off my mat. So we're going to do a good 10, 15, maybe even up to 20 reps on each side. Slowly going back and forth. I love this movement for slow repetition, especially early in the day, because it warms up and mobilizes a lot. And by going back and forth, it also exposes any kind of imbalances that we want to really kind of pay attention to, especially around the hips. But what you'll really find is by doing slow, low-level reps on this, that the hips just open up in a way that feels really good. Once you've done 5 or so on each side, now we're going to start to open up that shin box. As you get into position, let that back leg slide a little bit more open. I'm no longer worried about keeping my chest and shoulder square with the shin. At this point, we can explore a little bit. We can reach through the knee. We can continue to reach through the shin. We can kind of go against the grain. We can even go beyond the knee. As long as it is not painful, it's okay to explore a little bit. Big thing here, though, is as we open up that back leg, I want to feel that back hip mobility. I don't want it to be painful, but I want to notice how it feels in different positions, especially if it's different when it's on the right side compared to the left side. And the more you start getting that back hip opening up, you may also notice differences in that glute stretch on the front hip. Does one side feel tighter and more restricted than the other? That's going to be a really big deal with our gait, because our glutes need to have access to length in order to function well. And if one side is tight and restricted, that's generally going to be an indication that there is some inhibition in that glute and possibly some instability related to that glute. We're continuing to slowly open that back leg up until we get closer and closer to what we would consider a yoga class pigeon pose. I'm not overly concerned about that end range pose, but I do want to notice the differences between the right side and the left side. Am I able to get closer to it on one side than the other? Again, that will be an indication of some imbalance between the sides. My right side is generally the tighter one. This is where I get into more tension in the glute on the right hip and the more tension in the anterior compartment of my left hip. So where my left hip stays tight and compressed to protect my body from an unstable knee related to 5 knee surgeries. All right, so now we get in, we're going to come to our back. So laying on our back, we're going to bring feet off the floor. I want the hips to be a little bit less than 90 degrees. Knees can be right at 90 degrees. We're going to bring our arms and point straight up to the ceiling, and I want to reach and feel the shoulder blades lift off the floor, and then I want to spread the shoulder blades as wide as possible on the floor, keeping the arms up towards the ceiling. I want to feel that upper body spread. This is where I want to imagine we're laying in a sand pit, and I want to press and engage the shoulder blades. I want to downwardly press them into the sand because I want to make a really nice imprint in the sand of my shoulders, my shoulder blades specifically. Elbows can now softly come down and touch the floor for a little bit of extra leverage, but maintain that imprint of the shoulder blades. The shoulder blades staying imprinted in the sand is the most important part of this movement. I want to work on feeling that in posterior core engagement of the shoulders. We're going to get into our hip rotations, but I don't want to smear my imprint in the sand. I don't want that shoulder to lift or slide around at all. So we can start letting the hips rotate slowly and lightly in one direction, only going as far as you can maintain that solid downward pressure in the shoulders. And then inhale to center, exhale as we rotate to the other side. And with each one, you can see if you can start to get a little bigger in that rotation. But again, without losing your imprint in the sand, maintain that downward pressure through the shoulder blades. We're trying to get that downward pressure. This is going to be a part of our primal core flow. So I want to feel this now because it's going to be a little bit easier to feel it when we get into the next part of our movement with it. With each one, we're seeing if we can squeeze a little bit more range in each direction, but we're also assessing how much rotation, lumbar rotation, do you have moving to the left? Does it feel tighter on the right side compared to how far you're able to go to the right and what you feel on the left side? I have less range of motion when I rotate to my left. I feel more tightness in my right side low back. That's kind of a chronic area for me. When I rotate to the right, it feels smooth and I have a lot more access to movement. I can keep this shoulder really solidly on the ground. We're going to go ahead and put our feet flat to the floor. I want to keep that downward pressure through our shoulder blades. In fact, I want to go ahead and bring elbows off the floor. I want to have hands kind of pointed up to the ceiling, but shoulder blades are still spread and grounded down. We're going to come back into breath with pelvic tilts. Breathing into our belly. Feel that belly lift. Don't let your shoulders disengage. Exhale. We're drawing the navel in. Let that belly button press your spine into the floor. We're getting a little bit of a scoop of the pelvis. Inhale. How far forward can you feel that pelvis tilt? Making sure we're not going into pinch or pain in the low back. Exhale. Can you scoop, and how much pressure can you feel of your belly button? I don't want to push through the feet right now. We're going to push through the feet in just a second, but I want the feet to be soft. I don't want to lift the sacrum off the floor in order to feel that pressure of the belly button. I want all of that movement to happen from your core, not from your feet. And as we start to feel that nice subtle movement of the pelvis, on our next inhale, as we inflate, on the exhale, as we press the spine, now we get to engage in our feet, and we're going to peel the sacrum off the floor. And then we're going to peel each vertebrae one at a time. And I want that to come from scooping that tailbone up. It's like you're trying to turn your tailbone up to the ceiling. Again, rib cage should be dropping as that pelvis is scooping. We're seeing how high can we come up? Can we feel some stretch through the front of the hips? And then on the inhale way down, we're seeing if we can touch one vertebrae at a time and place everything back down in the same way till we get to the sacrum. Inhale, allow that belly to lift. Exhale, flatten the spine first, and then peel the spine off the floor. Again, shoulder blades are still solidly pressed into the floor. I want to watch out for that rib cage jutting out on this. We're going to let that rib cage move in just a minute, but for right now, can you scoop with that rib cage dropped? Can you feel the stretch on the front of the hip? Can you feel the glutes tighten up and engage in the rear? If you're able to feel that, then I want to scoop into it a little bit more and get maximum engagement in the glutes. On the next one, as we exhale, getting to the top, we're going to stay at the top. And now we're going to come back and bring in our breath, allowing the rib cage to now flare. So inhale, pelvis is going to tilt forward, rib cage will stick out. Exhale, we're scooping as the rib cage drops. And we'll do a good 5 to 6 breaths. I want to maintain the height of our hips on this. The hips are rotating, but they're not dropping to the floor. And if you're able to keep those hips rotate or elevated and scoop, feeling that rib drop as you scoop, by the time you get to 5 or 6 breaths, your glutes should be lighting up on fire. Then we can go ahead and drop the hips back down to the floor. So now we're going to start getting into the next layer of the primal core flow. This is going to be significantly more challenging. This is where I expect a lot of people to start dropping off on their ability to do this next step. We're going to get back into that hip bridge, but we're going to be working more through our shoulders. And just to give you an idea of what we're doing in our shoulders. So the shoulders should be downwardly pressed and engaged already. We're going to have scoop and be in that maximum hip drive with the rib cage down, drawn down. And I'm going to push that shoulder blade, I'm going to push it into the floor even more. And any downward pressure is going to create an upward reach on the other side. So by pushing down,
it's going to lift my opposite shoulder up. I'm going to inhale, letting that shoulder back down, and then I'm pressing the opposite shoulder into the floor to lift. Now, to start off with, I'm not overly concerned with how high that shoulder comes off the ground. I'm more interested in, can you feel downward pressure, even if that other shoulder doesn't lift? Can you press and engage in the floor? And can you do the same thing on the opposite side? Does one side feel weaker than the other? That's going to be a good assessment point to start with. If you have weakness on one side, again, you're probably not going to get to the next level of this progression just yet. While we're doing this downward pressure, I want to make sure that we're keeping those hips elevated. If you feel the hip drop as you pull through one shoulder, then that's your core is not integrated. I want to keep those hips engaged as you press down. One last little teaching point on this. I don't want to reach my shoulder up. I can reach it up without pressing my opposite shoulder down. So this is not the movement. I'm not reaching up. It's pulling down lifts this side. I don't have to reach. It gets lifted up by pushing into that opposite side. So, putting all that together, as we inhale, scoop, driving the hips, getting into this upper position, grounding through the floor, can you press and lift? And if you can press and lift, then we can look at the next progression for this movement. I'm going to show it real quick. I know very few people are going to be able to do it the first time. What we're going to get into now is a thread through. So as I drive, hips come up, pressing that shoulder into the floor. My opposite foot, I have to lift my heel, so I got to press through the ball of the foot, and then I'm going to rotate onto the side of the shoulder as I thread that leg through. Bringing it all the way back in, coming back up to my hip bridge, I can then do the same thing to the other side. Driving shoulder down, lift that ball of the foot, opposite foot comes up as I thread through. This is working on one half of our primal core flow. All right, so now we're going to switch to our chest, laying on our stomach. And we're going to get into the other half of the primal core flow, starting with elbow push-ups. I want to start by having my hands go straight out to the side with the palms down. And then we're going to spiral the palms up as we pull our elbows into our sides. My palms are now up, my forearms are flat to the ground, but I'm not laying on top of my arms. So I'm going to sit up to show this part. So hands are down. As I spiral my palms up, I am pulling my elbows into the side. I want to feel that medial epicondyle of the elbow, that elbow bone on the inside. I want to feel it touch the side of my ribs. I don't want to bring it underneath my body. I want to keep it out to the side. My chest gets to stay on the floor. Elbows come into this position. And what we're going to do is we're going to spiral, rotating palms down as we push through the elbows to do a push-up off of the floor. So let's get into that position. Palms are down. Spiral, palms up as we pull elbows in. From here, we have two options with the legs. If this is new and we're working on good core, we're developing core, we don't quite have good core strength, we can lift the feet off the floor and we can be on our knees. I want to exhale, scoop the pelvis so that we feel the core engage. I want to feel the glutes tighten up lightly through that scoop. And as we exhale, we're going to spiral palms as we push up towards the ceiling. And then we're going to inhale. We're spiraling the palms up as we pull our elbows back in to that rib cage, side of our rib cage. So again, press, inhale down. If you're ready for the next progression to that, toes will go down. We're going to actively lift the knees up to the ceiling, scoop the pelvis as we exhale, spiral, drive through the elbows, lift. Inhale as you pull back down. These elbow pull-ups are a great progression for building up push-ups. So this is a good movement for push-up strength if push-ups are something that you want to improve on. Good. Now, next progression. Again, this is going to be where people start to drop off because neurologically this next part is really challenging. We're going to stay on elbow planks and we're going to do spirals through one side at a time. So it's going to drop us down to one side shoulder and then back up. The difficulty with this is how we spiral that arm, trying to pull that elbow in. A lot of people, when they get into this position, they try to drop their shoulder down to the floor. They try to reach with their shoulder, and they can't move through that arm. And so it's really, really difficult, challenging, and incredibly frustrating. So, try to get into this. So again, starting out on the floor, spiral up, getting my push-up onto elbow. And now I'm focusing on one side. I'm spiraling that palm up, and I am pulling my elbow so that medial epicondyle, that bony part, touches my rib cage. Once I'm here, I can very easily just roll onto my shoulder. And then I can roll off my shoulder, press, spiral back up to plank, and then do the same thing on the other side. But again, it's this spiral and pull in that is important. What I see a lot of people do is they're trying to drop through their shoulder, and they don't know how to spiral, and then they got this big drop. They don't have control. So it's pull that elbow in. It's almost like you're doing a cable pull or a row. You're pulling in, which feels counterintuitive because you have weight and load pushing into the floor. So it feels like you need to push, but you're really pulling. Again, it takes a little bit to wire that neurology to where that starts to make sense. So the last progression on this is a little simpler if you're able to get into that spiral. And that's going to be getting into our toe tap and our thread through. So as I spiral to my left side, I'm on my shoulder. I can bring that foot up to the ball of that foot. And I can start with just doing a toe tap. Tap, bring it back down, spiral to the other side. Same thing. Tap that toe all the way across. If that is easy and we're ready for the next progression, then we can do our thread through. Spiral as we tap that toe. Now we're going to drive and thread that foot all the way into our hip bridge, which is where we just ended with the other side of this. And if we're able to get to that on this side, we ought to be able to complete the entire primal core flow, which looks like this. All right. So, we're going to finish out On our back, coming back to our crocodile breath. Making our nice big C shapes with our hands, thumbs in the rear, index fingers wrapped around into the abdominals in the front. Nice inhale, fill that balloon. Exhale, draw the navel into the spine. And again, notice how does that expansion of the balloon move right side compared to left side. It may be a little bit, it should hopefully it moves better than it did at the beginning of the session. You may notice that you're tired, fatigued, and taxed, and in some ways it might actually feel more challenging and difficult. But the areas where you feel it not moving as well, those are the areas, that's the area that we want to put more practice. Not just every day, but even multiple times a day. Breath is important. The better we breathe, the better we're going to move. Go ahead and let the hands relax off the ribs, the abdominal wall. Feel your shoulders soften to the floor. Let that breath now move up into the ribs. Feel that same balloon effect, breathing into the chest, out through the sides, and into that upper back. On the exhale, allow your shoulders to relax and soften to the floor. Kind of breathe into that tension on the inhale, and on the exhale, allow that tension to melt to the floor. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes and very slowly get up. I want to get up to a sit before we come to a stand. Make sure we're not dizzy or lightheaded.